Cool. Welcome, everyone. This is another episode of Filmmakers After Dark. I have local armourer with me, Brendan Moriarty. How are you, sir?
Pretty good. Yourself?
That's good. Not too bad, not too bad. So for the people out there that don't know who you are or what you do, besides obviously your normal day job, do you want to give me a bit of a rundown on what you do in the film industry?
Obviously I do this part-time, so my primary role is I supply imitation firearms and prop firearms to the local movie industry, and along with supplying the actual weapons themselves, we also provide a degree of coaching in how to hold and use weapon safety, and how people like when people are actually holding them, how to hold them, and the application of those weapons, so they look a little bit more realistic.
And that's everything from guns to baseball bats to whatever. It's not just guns, is it?
Primarily my focus is firearms, yep, but along the way we've accumulated quite a few other weapons, including baseball bats, yep. We do have a few swords, we have knives, both rubber and plastic, grenades. I've also picked up radios, what we call CES, so everything from webbing, fake body armor, uniforms, including some pretty good police uniforms, police badges, all that sort of stuff as well.
Okay, so basically if people wanted to make like a full cop film or something, they can, yeah?
Yep. What we did was create some uniforms. It was a project I worked on with yourself. I saw some of the uniforms that had been initially supplied, and thought I could do a little bit better than that. Kudos to your costume designer at the time, who actually puts together some very good ones at the last minute. But we've developed some very good ones that resemble an old West Australian police uniform. So light blue shirt, dark blue trousers, caps, badges. We've had custom-made patches made up. So we are close enough to look like a police officer, but not enough to actually be impersonating a police officer.
Okay. Ziggy said hi. How are you, Ziggy? So obviously we'll get onto the topic of rust a little bit later on. So when people want to use firearms on your set, what's one of the main things that you advise them on or let them know before you even consider it?
First up is what firearms and what type of firearms they need, and if they actually do need firearms at all. And by that, I specialize in what we call imitation firearms. So they are not real firearms under the law. They're controlled weapons under the Weapons Act of WA and regulations, as opposed to firearms, which are controlled under the Firearms Act and regulations. We've got multiple levels from some very simple rubber. This is going to work because I'm doing it on my phone now. One-piece castings, which look like a gun, and that's all they are. They're lightweight. This one doesn't have a trigger. They've got no moving parts, and we can actually go up all the way to weapons that will simulate everything a real firearm will do, except go bang. Obviously, we do have some blank firing ones as well that will make a bang and a flash. So one of the first questions we ask is, what are you using them for? If they're simply sitting in a holster, then we go for as simple as we possibly can. There's no sense in going too complex. And then the next question, of course, is how many they need and where they're using them. So before we even get into handling the firearms, we need to know what the environment they're going to be used in, because we need to make sure that we actually advise the appropriate people, including the police, and things like that. And then we'll actually move into the safety side of it and how to actually handle the firearm.
Okay, so the one you just showed us, so you've got what they call drop guns, yeah?
That was a drop gun I showed you, yeah.
And do they get commonly used for rehearsals and things like that, or are they just...
Yes. I actively encourage people, if they're doing blocking. We've got them in black at the moment in a couple of different types. I've also got some of the original ones which are in blue. And blue is a internationally recognized safety color for training. So if you're doing block throughs or rehearsals, things like that, these guns are a far better option, simply because you're very difficult to hurt yourself with them, particularly with the blue ones. They are far less likely to be mistaken for a real firearm by anyone else who may be observing what's going on.
Okay. And so have you used a lot of blank, like actual firing guns on set?
Not in local films here. I've used blanks privately. but not on sets here. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, primarily safety. Yes, we'll talk about what happened on Rust, but people also fail to take into account issues like sight and hearing damage. These things are extremely loud. If you're going to have a shootout inside a room somewhere, you need to be wearing hearing protection. Your crew need to be wearing hearing protection. It's often easier. If you don't need to use them, don't use them. The other reason is that currently in WA, we're not allowed to use what they call a forward venting blank fire imitation firearm. We can use a functional licensed firearm that has been modified for blank fire. What we can use as imitation firearms is something like, give me a second. For example, get it out of the box. Got one here. It was all working really well when I had this on the stand, but unfortunately, no.
That's all right.
Something like this one.
Okay.
And that's actually a what we call a top venting or side venting blank firer. And what you can't see me doing right now before I pick it up again is just reconfirming that it's actually empty.
Okay.
So with these ones, again, you're probably not going to be able to see this too well. There's actually the barrel is blocked.
Yep.
And any of the blast actually vents out through the side of the cylinder here. So nothing actually goes forward. On the semi-autos, the actual vent, you can't see it too well in this lighting, unfortunately, and where I'm holding it is actually there's a small hole in the top of the chamber there. So again, the barrel's blocked. So the flash will actually come up. There's no way anything can go forward out of the barrel. Problem with that, now that we're using far better definition on our cameras, higher resolution, higher frame rates, is it's very obvious that the flame's not coming out the barrel. So you can remove it in post-production, but it's actually quite difficult. Putting a dummy flash at the front is fairly easy, I've been told, but removing the other flash can be a little bit difficult. Third reason for not using a lot of blanks is cost. You are looking anywhere up to $2 per round. If you have a gunfight where someone's just fired 30 rounds, that's $60 before you even start. And then if you get it wrong and have to redo it, it just becomes a very, very expensive exercise.
So the way that they like it comes out the side and the back, is that you modified it, or did you have them modified before you bought them?
No, these specific ones are built as imitation firearms, so they're not firearms at all. They're called an imitation. And these ones are built, they come from the manufacturer to either side vent, top vent, or in the case of the forward vent ones, to forward vent.
Okay. And obviously, so there'd be a lot of, with them being imitation, is it hard to get them here?
Right now, yes, extremely hard. In theory, they don't require a license in WA, but you do require a permit to import, which is issued by WA Police. It was fairly free reign. We did have some big issues with someone bringing a lot in. And they turned up being used for nefarious purposes. So the police aren't just handing out import permits. You need to have a valid reason for doing it, or they just won't issue the permit, in which case you won't be able to bring it in.
Okay. Now, if somebody was to obviously come up to you and say, look, Brendan, we want to use blanks on set, would you do it?
Not. It's a bit of a complex answer. Short answer is, or the long answer would be yes, but. And then it's where we go into discussion about, do we really need to be using blanks? Is there another option that we can use? And why do you want to use blanks? What effect are you looking for? Because what they may be looking for, you may not be able to achieve with blank ammunition at all.
Well, yeah, and I think part of the reason for that might also be budget, really, because maybe they might not have the budget to CGI the effects in, and they want that effect of a blank fire. So in that circumstance, it's still probably not ideal, but in that circumstance, because a lot of people don't have money to finish stuff in post, or like the pet haters do it in post. So I suppose in that situation, that might be one where you may do it. I don't know. Yep.
And it would also be subject to a lot of controls. It wouldn't just be a free for all. Let's all go out and start having a yippee shoot. We'd actually sit down. We'd establish the protocols we're going to use, what procedure we're going to use, and we'd stick rigidly to that. And there's always that clause: if you're not following what we request you to do, or I request you to do as an armourer, I will pack up my toys and go home. If I don't think that it's safe, I will stop doing it straight away. And repeated, or even in some case a first breach, if it's bad enough, would be enough for me just to say no. I'm not doing this. Okay. It's we're putting too many people at risk.
So this is a comment from Ziggy. Obviously, he was on Black Ghost. It says, yep. Glad we didn't use ammo in our shoot. I'm sure Anthony would have accidentally shot me. But yeah, so just go. Yeah, so just on Black Ghost, it was really, everyone felt extremely safe, except for the one incident that obviously happened later on. But that was
outside. Yep.
Yeah. You know, you made it perfectly clear when you got to set that, and I tried to make it as clear as I can, that only the people involved in using the guns were to handle them, and they weren't to handle them unless you gave them to them, and you showed everybody how to use them and said, don't put your finger on the trigger until you're ready. And I think that made everybody feel more, and even them, they didn't have bullets in them, but we were able to, in a way, add the sound in as best we could. But even with the sniper rifle or the rifle I was using, which I was a bit of a retard because I was closing the wrong eye because I've never used one before. But even those kind of guns, just giving a rundown on them, on how to use them, and also even the right up to the part where you said if the police turn up, just everybody put them down and just let you deal with them. I think there needs to be that, to know that happens, I think made everyone feel a lot safer as well.
Yeah, and that's part of the, well, for want of a better word, professionalism that's involved in it, is that we have a procedure, we stick to it. If we have a set of rules that everyone follows, everyone knows where they go with it. One of the reasons we went that path, and we still go down that way, even though we're using imitation firearms, is at some point in your career as an actor, as a producer, as a director, you are going to be dealing with either with a live firearm modified to fire blanks. Yeah. If you develop a bad habit now, literally playing with a toy gun, that's a habit you'll carry forward. If you become used to not watching or not having muzzle discipline, not knowing where your gun's pointing, resting your fingers on the trigger, those sort of things, those habits are very easy to learn and very hard to unlearn. I've got to the point now where I pick up a power drill, I actually practice trigger discipline on that. I don't put my finger on the trigger. And that's one of the reasons we go that there is, we impress on people that these aren't toys, they're a controlled weapon. And that helps build that degree of trust with people as well.
Yeah. So Ziggy's also commented saying, love live firearms, love spending time at the range.
He does, or?
Yeah. For you, is that the only time you would use live firearms?
Yep. Yeah, in a range. At this point, I'm not bringing live firearms onto sets. Excuse me. There's a lot of other issues involved with that. What people make the mistake with, it's actually an offence to point a. Hello, can you hear us?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it just sounded like I was a bit muffled.
Okay. It's actually an offence under the regulations in WA to point a firearm at another person. So even though they're modified, even though a firearm might be modified for blank firing, it's still a licensed firearm, and we're subject to all those rules and regulations. It is just far safer and easier to be using imitation firearms. I do have an extensive collection of personal firearms, both on my collector's license and on my shooting license. But yeah, they're not coming anywhere near a movie set.
Okay. I think there's something wrong with my mic. Just give me 1 sec.
I'm hearing you fine.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I could hear you before as well.
Okay.
It's a bit clearer.
Just Ziggy said, what's with the sound? I don't know what's going on.
Is it me or you?
Oh, yeah, sounds fine. Just through my headphones. So, what else? All right, so I've got a comment here from somebody today. They've asked me to ask a question.
Is that the one from Bob Hart?
Yeah. it's quite a long one. It says, asking about armourers and gunsmiths, whether an armourer should have the developed skills of a gunsmith and not just a hobby-level understanding of the inner workings of firearms. If a weapon is misfiring or spontaneously discharging, as commentary on Rust tragically suggests, then it requires skilled maintenance or destruction to avoid the gun going into the wrong hands.
Yep. In answer to that, whether an armourer needs to be a gunsmith, my first answer would be no. If the gun's not working and it's something that would require a gunsmith level attention, take it off set, get rid of it, swap it out for another one. Do not continue to use it. It's like if your car's brakes aren't working, you don't continue to use it in the hope that it's going to get better. So at that point, yeah, you don't necessarily need to be, or wouldn't necessarily need to be a gunsmith. You certainly do need to have an understanding of firearms, probably a little bit beyond the went down to Lone Rangers twice and got to fire a shotgun sort of thing. So you need to know firearms, to have a fair degree of skill, and to be competent in actually one, handling a firearm, and two, in safe handling of a firearm.
Yeah,
You probably a lot of people who shoot casually may not necessarily have the degree of they're competent to use a firearm, but they might not have the same level that you find in someone who, for example, was a range officer shooting on a firing range or something of that nature. Using a gun on a set is probably more akin to in the military than going out the back and target shooting, because a lot of people have firearms and you're being handed a deadly weapon.
Okay. So I just got a comment here from Svetlana. She was on Black Ghost.
Yep.
It says the brief we both have to the crew before the actual filming of BG was very helpful and professional. Which every film set was so well organised.
It's a matter in response to that is everyone needs to feel comfortable. So it's all very well to say, oh, the armourer's here, don't worry about it. I don't need to know anything. Is you and I need the person who is either handling the firearm or got to point it at them to feel comfortable with what's happening and understand, so that, for example, if I demonstrate that the weapon is unloaded, and if I'm not demonstrating it right, then you can pick that up. Does that make sense? I quite regularly, and I've been laughed at before by asking, has anyone here actually brought a firearm or live ammunition on set? Because that's not unknown to happen. And we don't want something like that happening where there's a weapon that we don't actually have control or eyes on to actually turn up somewhere, because we've got no idea what state it's actually in.
Okay, does my mic sound like it's echoing?
Just a little bit of echo. That might be me though, because I'm not using earphones here.
Let me try something here. Is that better?
Yep, that's good.
Okay. Yeah. What's the difference between armourer and a prop master?
You broke up. You say, what's the difference between an armourer and a prop master?
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't know the technical differences. The armourer has weapons expertise and is responsible for the weapons. Prop master would be overseeing all the props on the set. So the armourer is a specialised role where they're looking specifically after the firearms that are actually, or weapons that are being used on set. You could have your prop master as your armourer, although ideally you will have one person designated whose sole and only job is to monitor those firearms. And then they're not distracted by being the runner or helping prepare lunch or something like that. They're only purely and simply there to keep an eye on all the firearms and the firearms handling.
And I guess another big issue is comes to the first AD on set. From what I've seen, it looks like it's their job as well. Once the armourer is set, it's a cold gun, which I'll get you to explain that in a second. It's their job to check the gun, yeah?
It can be their job. That will depend on what protocols that you set up beforehand. You may decide that the first AD will check with the armourer, or you may decide they don't. However, someone must at some point demonstrate that weapon is clear and declare it as a cold weapon before it comes on, or a hot weapon. before it comes on set. I believe Aaron put a post up. They follow a general procedure in America. Where I've worked on a couple of other sets, it's actually been the stunt coordinator safety officer who has confirmed with me the weapons are clear. At the start of the day, the first AD has actually gone through the weapons that we're going to be using with me and satisfied himself in this instance that we weren't using functional firearms and that we weren't using ammunition. So he was safe with that.
Yeah, okay. I have got a bit of echo on you. I don't know why.
Just hear a little bit of it now.
Is that better?
Yeah, a little bit. I can understand you. I don't know about anyone
What about
else.
now?
Yep, that's not bad.
Yeah, all right. Well, so I think maybe we should get into maybe discussing some of Rust. So what do you think happened on that?
It was a major screw up from where to go. They have breached multiple safety protocols to get to where they got to, because you should have a situation where if the first one failed, the second one should have picked it up. Now, we don't know for sure until the final reports come out. We're hearing that apparently they were doing some target shooting in between takes in their downtime, which is how live ammunition was able to be on set, which should never have happened. I don't know how someone could check and declare a gun clear if there's ammunition in it, if there's actually rounds in it. It's a pity that we're using the phone, not the other one. I've actually got a single action army, which I'm guessing is very similar to the weapon that was actually involved in this particular incident. And for example, on this one, to check that it's actually clear, you open a loading gate at the back of it. Again, you can't see this too well, I don't think, on the screen. And you can actually rotate the cylinder around and check there's no rounds in there. So how someone could pick a weapon up and then say, not see a round in there, and in this instance, this one being my Brunei, I'm not going to use that one. Give me 1 second. This one here, that was a blank fire. This one is not a blank fire. And let's turn the light around here. Okay, I don't know if you can see something just fall out of the gun then.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, that was actually a round. I'm just going to put it's a dummy round. I'm going to put it back in there again. So you can see straight away if there's actually a dummy round in the chamber, or if there's anything in the chamber, or if the chamber's empty. So whoever cleared the weapon should have been able to see straight away. Give me a second. That the weapon was actually not in fact cold as they claimed it was. I'm just going to empty this one out now. So what should have happened is the armourer should have prepared those weapons. They should have discussed and worked out what was required. So in this instance, they would have known that it was actually going to be a rehearsal and no ammunition was required. The weapon should have been cleared as empty, and whatever situation they use, whether they put it on the rack or whether the armourer keeps possession of it and then hands it to the first AD, and the armourer should have actually demonstrated to the AD that it was clear. It sounds like none of this has occurred. The third step is you can actually demonstrate to the actor before you give the actor the weapon that the weapon's clear. That's not necessary, but they've given the weapon to the actor in question, and he's believing it was empty, has carried out his rehearsals. Had they not had live ammunition, this would never have occurred. Had they put a blank in it, they probably would have been far enough away that they would have got a nasty fight, but no one actually would have suffered any injury other than perhaps in their hearing. And that's what we're hearing at the moment.
So could a blank have done as much damage as a live bullet, like actually gone through the shoulder?
Potentially, yes. And the reason I say that is right now, what you're looking at is a dummy round, inert round in 22 Winchester Magnum rimfire. So basically, that's an expended case that we put a projectile on. There's no powder, no primer, and there's actually a small hole drilled in the base so that I know that it's not actually a live round. This is actually a dummy round, what we call a snap cap or a proving round. and that's just solid casting. Now, I had to keep this one separate so I didn't get it mixed up. That's a live round. That's a dummy round. No difference in that projectile on the end there. So if you were to inadvertently wedge that projectile somehow in the barrel and put a blank behind it, it would effectively be a slightly less powered bullet. And that's kind of what happened with Brandon Lee when on the set of The Crow, is that the blank round actually pushed a projectile out the barrel, and that was enough to penetrate his abdomen. I believe it ended up lodged near his spine. Had they not had, had just been a blank with nothing else in the barrel, probably not at that range. It wouldn't have done anything. Had there been something in the barrel, yes, it would have pushed it out, but probably nowhere near with the amount of force to penetrate two people. In this instance, it's gone through the chest of the cinematographer and then into the shoulder of the director who was standing behind her. You still hearing me there? Yep.
There we go, try that. So I think also with Brandon Lee was the fact that Mike Massey was off balance and they were rushing and he was supposed to aim for his shoulder, so and too close. That's what they thought happened with that.
Yeah, look, as I mentioned before, it's illegal to point a firearm at anyone, but a safety protocol dictate that you do not directly aim at a person. You always aim off and cheat your camera angle. So even if they had a live round, if he wasn't pointing it at them, no one would have been hit. And unfortunately, that's what's happened. It was pointed directly at them because they believed they were in a rehearsal with an empty gun.
Because so on Rust, they said that when he pulled it out the first time, it was fine. Then the second time it fired, but he said his stunt double, the gun actually malfunctioned twice as well.
Yeah, I don't know what went on there. Now, there's a couple of things that could have happened, depending where they were sourcing their blanks from, whether they were loading them themselves or whether they were commercially sourced blanks. They may have been questionable there. The other thing is, I'm assuming most people are familiar with how a revolver actually works. So give me a second. Just make sure this one's empty. And again, on a single action revolver, you have to pull the hammer. This is probably not going to show up too well, but you'll actually see the cylinder actually revolves each time. So from behind, I'm going to do this from the front. Don't panic, it's an empty gun. Don't know whether you can see that the cylinder's actually revolving each time.
Mm-hmm.
So potentially, if I open the chamber now, I might see an empty chamber. And when I fire the first time, it's hitting an empty chamber. When I fire the second time, it's actually hitting a live chamber. So you could pretend, it's like the old Russian roulette. You could have 5 empty chambers and 1 live chamber. So you could fire it 5 times and nothing would happen. And then on the 6th time, it goes bang.
Okay. But they also had an inexperienced prop master as well, eh?
The prop master or the armourer?
Well, they didn't say an armourer. They just said the girl, the prop master, was the one. There were 3 guns on a cart, and she just handed one to the first AD and said, cold gun, and she said she didn't feel comfortable loading blanks.
Yeah, I think there might be a couple of mixed or, shall we say, badly reported instances there. I think the reference to not feeling comfortable loading blanks may refer to her first film when she first kicked off doing armourer. She wasn't that experienced, although her father is quite experienced. I'm not sure whether there was a separate prop master or whether she was acting as prop master as well as armourer. However, personally, I wouldn't have handed the weapon to anyone without checking it myself. If I'd lost eye contact with it for a few minutes, I'd be checking it when I picked it up again. So to simply pick up a weapon and not even give it a cursory once over and just hand it to someone, to me, it's inexcusable. There's no reason to do that.
Yeah, and the whole camera crew had left except for the DOP because of the union of the pays, and people are wondering why the DOP didn't leave as well.
I have no idea on that. I gather there was some safety issues. Some of it was pay and conditions. It was long hours and things like that. possibly yourself or maybe even someone else who's listening in would probably be able to put a better spin on it. But in my mind, if this was an important project or a passion project to me, I'd stick it out till the end. And maybe that was the case with her, is that it was an important project to her and she was determined to see it through.
That's what they reckon, but a lot of the paying conditions had to do with the fact that where they were staying was an hour away from set. So they were doing 14, 15-hour days, hour there, hour back, and that's why a lot of the union people left, and the crew they brought in were locals.
Locals, or they were non-union, like they weren't inexperienced, like they were capable of doing their jobs, or not. Sorry, weren't ignorant of their jobs. They were capable of doing their jobs. As how much experience they would have had, I don't know.
Okay.
That is something you would need to consider with WA, is that we have a wealth of talent here, and we have varying degrees of expertise, ranging from students who are straight out of film school to someone who thinks it's nice and wants to get involved in it. So there's passion and commitment, but maybe not a lot of actual hands-on experience. And of course, distance is always tyranny in WA.
Yeah, and so I wonder how much input Alec Baldwin, being the producer, had in having blanks and live rounds on set.
I don't know. I would expect that any producer would meet with the armourer prior to, as part of your pre-production process, and actually work out exactly what you want. So sit down and go, yeah, we want to use blanks. Yes, we want to do this. They obviously, the cost and budget would come into it, and they'd compare your costs against it and work out what they want to do. So as a producer, I imagine he would have had a fair bit of input overall, but down to the specifics of exactly which blanket, which gun, I don't think he probably would have had a lot of input to it. That's tentative why you need to hire the armourer.
Because I saw something today, and it said that there was a young kid on set, and when Alec Baldwin pulled the gun out, he told the kid to go as far away as possible when they were rehearsing, just so he wasn't in the light of the fire. But ultimately, I guess, who do you think, besides the first AD and the armourer, do you think there's anyone else responsible for what happened?
I'm not an expert. Fortunately, I've never actually had to deal with this situation myself. Legally, from what I'm reading, it's quite possible that the actor, as the actor, would not necessarily, if they've been told by the subject matter expert that the weapon is safe, then they have no reason to disbelieve that person, unless there was a reason that they knew this person was, didn't have the skills or something like that. So as an actor, probably not. The producers, again, if they've hired someone who is supposedly competent, and they've taken all steps to check that they are competent, how responsible they are, probably they'd still hold some. I mean, under our health and safety rules over here, ultimately, they would probably be responsible.
Okay, and I guess just in closing, obviously there was a film done here last year that had a mixture of live rounds and blank rounds. I don't have to mention the name of it, but you obviously try to distance yourselves from those sorts of projects as much as you can, eh?
If I'm not comfortable, I won't be party to it. And if I am involved in a project like that, then we do risk minimisation, which is you put your controls in place to make sure that you don't have any risk. For example, if for some reason I had to use live and blank ammunition on the same set, there'd be strict quarantining processes in place to ensure that we didn't inadvertently mix the ammo. We'd use timing so that all your blank gets used on one day, all your live gets used on another. And we'd certainly be double and triple checking every weapon when we clear a weapon. With that in mind, I've done it before with the Army where we've gone from blank to live and back again. I have seen someone shoot through what we call a BFA once, putting a live round in, failing to take the BFA off when swapping from blank to live and putting a live round through it. Fortunately, that weapon was designed with that eventuality in mind, so it didn't cause anything major, but potentially it could have been dangerous.
Okay. So, and you're always on set when people have guns or firearms?
Yeah, of what I have been doing because of mainly to make it easy for student actors is when we're using the drop guns, these ones. We generally don't be required, and usually we're using them in situations where it's in a cop's holster, for example, or the bad guy's got it shoved down the back of his pants. So it also depends on the crew. If I know who is on set as stunt coordinator, or who is producing, or who has control of it, or who the actors are, there are certain people I will allow a slightly more latitude because I know that they are competent. If we were using blanks, there's no way I could not be on set. And some of the more detailed imitations, again, no, I don't put them out unless I'm actually on set with them.
So, but with the drop guns, you don't need to be on set, eh?
Yeah, in WA, there's actually no requirement for you to have an armourer on set if you're not using live firearms. The only reason you would need the armourer is if the firearm is a live firearm, it's licensed, and they would be the licence holder. I strongly recommend that you engage an armourer. If your budget's low, we will work something out because the idea is to grow the industry and grow the industry safely. And the more help we can give them to do that, the better. By having an armourer on set, that particular person usually has a degree of skill if the firearm doesn't quite work right. How to wear your holster correctly. If you jam a dummy round or something like that, they're the person that's going to be there to help you out with that. There's nothing worse than if, for example, your sniper rifle from Black Ghost, if we had a jammed around in that and then you're stuck with the chamber half open and you've got no idea how to clear it because you're not an expert on M4 carbines. So, yeah, we do recommend there's an armourer on set at all times. They're also the one that'll be responsible for liaising with police and for managing even the imitation firearms. You don't want someone wandering off to lunch armed up. We've had a near miss. We didn't realise it was just at the time of the Christchurch shootings. We were filming a hip-hop video up in Subiaco, and one of the guys went to walk the long way around from the set and started to walk out the front door wearing a tack vest with a pistol strapped under his arm. He didn't. It never occurred to him, and it wasn't just like, oh, hang on, stop. You're opposite a hospital here. We don't need you to be walking walking down the street like that. You'll cause a panic. So that's why your armourer's there as well. He's keeping an eye on what everyone else is doing with these guns.
Yeah, and for those of you who do want an armourer, Brendan is very reasonable. He will work something out with you, so don't think you have to compromise. If you don't have that much of a budget, contact Brendan, and as long as he's comfortable doing it, then he'll work something out with you because he's very reasonable, which is why I tend to use him when I can.
Even if I don't end up getting engaged to work on the set, I'll come with you. I'll come and we'll talk things down and work out what you need to do. I'm not an RTO, so I can't give you a certificate, but I am more than happy to meet up with people at various times and run them through basic weapon skills, how to clear a weapon, things like that. So at least you've got some idea of what's going on.
And you always contact police operations before you go on set, yeah?
Yes. Always advise police operations. If you advise your local police station, the risk is that if someone hears or reports something, the responding officers may not be from the local station. The other thing is you'll always get a CAD number or incident report number from the police operation, so that if the police do react, you've got that number on hand. You will not get done with causing a public nuisance because you've advised them in advance. Even if you're inside a house where no one's going to see you, we've had instances where neighbours have reported what they thought was a domestic violence incident because they could hear shouting and yelling. And if you're using a minimal crew where you've only got literally one cameraman instead of a full film crew, they may not actually see that camera at all. So
yeah,
always
we had that with Slice, so we just had a knife on set, no guns or anything. But I let the police operations know, and they sent two police down, and they actually felt the knife to make sure that it was a prop knife. And so even with knives and things like that, they'll always, most of the time they'll do that.
Yep. We had some visitors on the set for fading numbers in Fremantle Prison. It was actually a case of they'd seen the report, they were on their normal patrol route, so they thought they'd come and have a look, and they just checked out the weapons while they were there. And similarly, when we were filming another art piece at the roundhouse. We had a guy, a Persian in a khaki uniform, an AK-47, and the local police patrol just popped in just to stick their heads in and just see what we were doing and say hi and just see what was going on.
Yeah, because we had him on. We did another film, Fox on the Rocks. We had him in there as well.
Yeah, that was actually same location. And the funny part is that's actually literally half a block away from the local police station.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. All right, Brendan. Well, thanks heaps for giving us an insight. And West Oz Theatrical Armourer is your company, yeah?
Yeah. Look us up on it's West Oz, as in the Wizard of Oz. Just sorry, the iPad didn't work because I had a whole raft of stuff here I was going to show people.
That's okay.
Yeah, what blank rounds look like and what dummy rounds look like and things like that. So I've now got to spend an hour trying to get everything back to the armory because my desk is literally. Don't know whether you can see that.
Yeah.
One thing I will point out, though, is that the one live round I demonstrated to you is actually in a completely separate container and away from there, so there's no confusion about where it actually is at any time.
Okay, cool. Well, again, thanks, Brendan. And if anybody does want to contact Brendan, I'll link everything and you can contact him and speak to him if you want weapons on set, regardless of whether it's firearms or not.
Cool. Always happy to help out.
Awesome. Thanks heaps, Brendan.
No worries. See ya.
Speak to you soon. Bye.